what have we got this week? The major themes we've seen over the last 7 days. Obviously, we saw not only the end of the month, but also the milestone of an end of a financial year and the latest house price growth statistics. We'll run through those. Again, new financial year brought new incentives or renewed programs. We're going to run through those, and I'm sure everyone's got quite a few questions as to how they work. How do you sell a house? It's an age-old question. Perhaps, more often than not, we're always talking about how to buy a home, but it's also important to understand how to sell a house as well. Right sizing, very interesting topic. A lot of thought in here. What exactly it means, we're not too sure, so we'll get into that. And then lastly, of course, as house prices keep going up and up, the age-old battle becomes between a freestanding home and an attached home or an apartment or a unit, and where do they sit in the market. So plenty of great topics there to run through. Of course, you can ask us anything. We'll try and follow primarily along these themes, but feel free to ask us anything that you can. Those of you that are keen, jump in now and put your questions in there so you'll be top of the queue, and I'll try and read through those before we get to the main question section. As always, I'm just going to quickly run through the stats from last weekend. So we've got the auction results. Finally, something came about that stopped Sydney from being more than 80% clearance for only the third time this calendar year, which is pretty amazing that it took a lockdown for it to get down there. If we zoom in and we have a look, you can see Sydney still over 70%. Still quite a few auctions, so pretty good considering all of those had to be online. Melbourne continued to power through. I think most of you will know, and we'll probably talk about this a bit more as we get into it, that Melbourne is slowly starting to catch up and is probably the only state in Australia that's still got a fair amount of puff left in it when it comes to house price growth, because it's been starting from a long way back. Rest of the country did pretty well. So notwithstanding Sydney pulled back a bit, we still had a mid-70% clearance rate nationally. And Melbourne obviously doing very strong there with more than 1,000 auctions happening on that weekend. Realestate.com, what are their stats saying? So most of you will know this. I'll quickly give you the one sentence on what they are. This is a leading indicator. So this is what realestate.com are seeing on their website in terms of the sales listings, and we'll go through rentals in a moment, and how engaged they're believing that people are on there. So it does take into account the tire kickers that are just clicking for the fun of it, but primarily it's sort of an indication as to what we should expect in terms of the level of demand from buyers over the next month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and so forth, as they're starting to refine into their searches. So if we drill into the national, first of all, it's remained relatively steady, over the last few months. It obviously grew in the last week or so. You can see perhaps mainly the main trend we've been mentioning before is the widening gap that's been occurring over the last 6 or so months between apartments and freestanding homes. So that's obviously going to be one of the topics we'll run through in a bit more detail. It's probably the only thing that I can say is if you forget the numbers in 2020 and you look back to 2019, so, closest to me here on the screen, and you compare to where they're tracking, you're almost 50% above the engaged level of buyers that were around in 2019. So that's definitely what we're seeing in the market, albeit it's remaining relatively steady at its current level. Let's have a look at our home state, Victoria here. A little bit more up and down than we saw in the national. Obviously a big spike you can see there a few weeks ago, as we went in and out of that 2-week lockdown. Otherwise, it's been relatively steady there. Again, we're starting to see that gap widening more between freestanding homes and apartments. Not as pronounced as the national one is, which is obviously the case as Sydney is primarily driving that. All right, rental, what are we seeing there? These are really, really hard to understand. We've been talking about a lot that we're surprised there's still a fair amount of demand. So if we drill into the national one, there appears to still be a number of potential renters out there, which on the one hand is surprising given the fact that, the events are still largely cancelled. We just heard that the Formula One here in Melbourne has been cancelled again 2 years in a row. So, that's sort of not having those casual workers in the inner city locations, renting those apartments. Obviously, the students are missing. So, we're still seeing that demand, and perhaps that might be more that we're seeing the existing population of renters turning over the homes more often, which I think definitely the guys will tell you they're seeing on the ground. Potentially they're seeing the same person coming to an open home that they saw, 6 months ago, and that they're churning through a lot more than they used to. And that's perhaps why we're still seeing relatively strong numbers here, because I think there's no doubt whilst, the rental market is nowhere near as bad as it was 12 months ago in the depths of the pandemic, it's definitely not back to where we would expect it. Likewise, if we have a look at the state numbers here, same thing, obviously tracking at a slightly slower trajectory than the national numbers, obviously well publicised during last year, the reasons for that. All right, so moving on. First, before I allow everyone to question me and the rest of the team, I have a question for you. I want to know, what's more important? Is it information or knowledge? So I want you to just think about that for a moment. Is it information or knowledge that you believe is more important? All right, put your finger on it before I tell you the answer. So the answer is knowledge. Now, I just want to unpack that for a moment. So, if we think about it, information is organised data about something, whereas knowledge is an understanding either through education or through experience. So, it's not information in itself, which is important, it's the knowledge. So that is being able to take on board that information, understand what it means, and then apply it to your own personal situation. And that's what we call actionable knowledge. Now, that's very, very much what those of you that know as well will know. That's what we're all about, is, helping you build up your own database of actionable knowledge. So, you're able to take on board the information that's constantly, coming through your news feed, coming at you from internet, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, newspapers, TVs, the weekend barbecue, wherever it is that you're getting that information from, being able to turn that, using that knowledge you've got and turn it into actionable knowledge so you know what you should be doing when you see these triggers or, what's occurring out there that sets off one of your triggers for you to take a certain action, whether that to be looking to buy a new home, changing over a rental property, selling a home, whatever it is, that's the actionable knowledge that we want you to build up so you know what you should be doing in the future. So really, really important concept. Those of you that are long-time listeners, as I mentioned before, I can see a lot of familiar names. You'll know this. I go through it every single week, and I apologise if you're bored about it, but it is a really, really important concept. So for those of you that are new, I wanted to make sure that you understand the difference between information and knowledge, because there is a ton of information out there, and the vast majority of it is total junk and rubbish made up by people with zero expertise, zero credibility, and they're just out there for the sake of creating information. There is some fantastic publishers, some great authors out there that put out great information, but it's really you having that knowledge to be able to filter through and understand what is important for you and create your own actionable knowledge database. All right, hopefully you've got that concept. If not, happy to hang around and have a chat with you in a bit more detail at the end of the session. So I've been chastising you guys now for about 7 or 8 minutes. My name is James Maitland. I'm the General Manager here at Salvo. I've helped create more than 11,500 homes for people just like you on the call today. Salvo, what do? Well, we do a ton of things. But ultimately, our main goal across all of our businesses is to help create homes for people. So it doesn't matter whether you're just looking to rent your first home ever after moving out of mum and dad's home, or you're an experienced investor looking to buy your third or fourth investment property, or a downsizer, an upgrader, first home buyer, whatever it is, we're all about helping you in whatever stage you are on that home ownership journey. So that's what we love doing. That's what we're here. And that's what today's sessions are all about. Joined today on the panel, Greg Arbeck, Jack Jan, and Lucas Karras. These guys have got a wealth of experience. We've all been doing this for well over a century now. Greg's obviously got the lion's share of that experience. You'll see by his slightly older looking face, but by no means the rest of us, just because we look young and fresh and don't have any greys coming out, by no means does that mean we also haven't been doing this for a ton of time as well. All right, so those of you that haven't done this before and you are joining us on Zoom, not on one of the other socials, really, really easy way to get involved. Remember, to get the most out of today's session, get involved, ask your questions, be active, be a participator. Don't just sit back and, be a bystander or a passenger. Get involved, because that's how we're going to get the most out of today's session for you. Really, really simple. First method, raise your hand. Those of you that are brave can do that, and you can come live and ask your question. For those of you that would prefer the tried and tested method, jump into the Q&A, put in your question. I'll be reading through those as we're going through the rest of today's session and putting them to the panel. If I do miss your question or I don't get it right, feel free to write another question against it, try and correct me, or we will hang around at the end and try and answer those questions. And as a last resort, if we don't get you, we will read through the transcript when this session's over. And any questions we believe we didn't answer adequately or we didn't get a chance to get to, we will reach out to you and hopefully we can help you that way as well. All right, so that is it for the introduction. Let's get stuck into it. I can see Lucas was wiping the sleep from the corner of his eyes. He's excited to get into it, so am I. So let's start. First up, CoreLogic, end of financial year. We mocked all the accountants last week for those of you that joined us, as well as the end of the month. Jack, can you tell everyone what do we see in terms of the stats? Give us the quick highlight in terms of results for the year.
Okay, no problem, James. So the 1st of July, and we enter into the new financial year. So we were expecting some statistics from the CoreLogic, and then they release the most interesting and also the figure we want to say. Nationwide, the Australian residential property for the last financial year has grown 13.5%. This is the greatest growth since 2004 in 17 years.
17 years. So there you go, 13.5% capital growth in financial year 2021. We haven't seen that stronger growth since 2004, which was 17 years ago. So stellar result. And I think all of you who would have been, a little bit worried and concerned at the end of financial year 2020, quite rightly so, as to what the next 12 months held in store, would probably be shocked if you could go back in a time machine and look at yourself, just over 12 months ago and what you're predicting. I don't think anyone out there predicted we'd be seeing national house price growth of 13.5%. So fantastic result. And I think that really highlights, if nothing else, let me just say this in that result. Growth is unpredictable. And so therefore, you need to just rely on focusing on the fundamentals. Now, Greg, can you tell us what is rule number 1, 2, and 3 in terms of picking the right real estate for you?
As we always got to say, it's location. And then if you doubt that, it's location. And then when you reconsider everything, you realize it's location. So location.
All right, good. So there you go. Greg's told you it's location, location, location. And that's what I think is more important, because, you can just see by this, no one would have expected the level of growth that we've got. But if you focused on the right location, you can really benefit from that, as well as help to mitigate any downside. Had the market not have gone as strong as it has, particularly in this last 6 months, is really where we've seen all that growth. Jack, what about our two key markets, Melbourne and Sydney? How did they fare?
Okay, so the Sydney actually is performing very well. It's a 15% increase for the last financial year. The Melbourne is 77% of the growth, and it's not good as Sydney. I think we have a long way to catch up. This is probably because the Melbourne from the last financial year. So we probably more than a quarter of the time we've been locked down. So we were sitting home. That's kind of the reason to slow down the Melbourne market. But the things I'm very surprised is across all the capital city, it's only Melbourne and also the Perth, we were on single digital growth. All other capital city, they were double digital growth. So it's performing very well.
So Sydney, 15% total capital gains for last financial year. That's an amazing result. And I think those of you that have been tuning in would be surprised if it wasn't as strong, given that, as I mentioned, there's only been 2 weekends in the last 6 months that Sydney hasn't had a greater than 80% clearance rate at auctions. So not unsurprising, that result. But I think, on the one hand, it's perhaps a little, odd to see Melbourne, given, they're both a very similar size market, being 50% of that growth in Sydney. But then on the flip side, as Jack pointed out, it's perhaps not unsurprising, given that we're probably starting 6 months behind the rest of the country. So, Jack, with that in mind, those people that are invested in Melbourne or still perhaps thinking about buying into Melbourne, is that it? Or are we imagining that gap, can't stay that wide forever and it's going to close in? What's sort of your views and what's the general views from people out there?
100% it will close the gap. The Melbourne, it will faster to catch up on the Sydney's rate. This is because, first of all, we have a lower stock. I mean, it's not enough property on the market for sale. And the second of all, the Victoria, Melbourne, we're doing well with the COVID, and they bring the people the confidence. I think this gap will be really, really close and in the next few months. So we will catch up, definitely.
Okay. So not dissimilar to when Lucas tells us about his favourite horse that he spent tens of thousands of dollars investing in, dreams of it being in Melbourne Cup, coming from behind, Sydney, long way out in front, and his horse Melbourne will catch up and they'll be tied for a photo finish. Is that what we're expecting, Lucas, from your point of view?
You're spot on.
And the photo finish, who's going to win in the end?
Of course, Melbourne.
Oh, there we go. All right. So look, that's always a good wrap there. Those of you that haven't got enough or want to see more of the stats, feel free to have a look. I'm sure most of you should be on email newsletter. I did attach all of those stats. Plenty of information there in last Saturday's newsletter. So have a look. I think it was issue number 69 or 70, 71, somewhere in there. Search and have a quick look, and you'll be able to download all of those stats and find out more about that. All right, let's change track for a little bit. So with all of this growth in prices, we've been talking a lot before about how there's limited supply or limited stock available for all these hungry buyers out there. So that leads me to a question that we often get, and I know Lucas is excited to tell us all about this: right sizing. What's going on out there in terms of housing wealth? How's these numbers that Jack's run through translating into people's hip pockets? And then what are we sort of seeing in terms of as the generations, transition and move through the different life stages?
Well, James, as Jack mentioned, we had huge increase in property values in the past 12 months. And, it has added huge value to the properties owned by the older Australians. And statistics are showing us that we're talking in excess of $1 trillion in the last 12 months alone.
Is that why Greg has got, his new Rolex on? We've seen him driving around the yellow Lambo because he's made so much money now.
Quite possibly. Look, the sort of, the data is showing us that despite the 2 previous booms we've had and 3 million new homes, the turnover has never topped the huge 622,000 homes that changed hands in 2003. while the baby boomers were really active.
So what you mean by that in terms of turnover, you're saying that the highest number of homes that were bought and sold in any 12-month period was 662,000.
622.
622. Okay. Wow. So, if we look across a population of mid, 23, 24, 25 million, and we say I don't know what the average household size is, but I guess we're talking only 622,000 homes was the highest number of homes that transacted in any given year. That's just a tiny fraction, isn't it?
Sure is. So there's some good reasons
what are
for
some
that.
of those reasons why? Like, why are people hanging on to their homes then? Why aren't they? Why aren't we so much more transient in terms of home ownership then?
Look, some of the most reasons that we've seen are sort of like excessive stamp duty for some people. Also, saving for the initial deposit, because as prices keep on rising, it's very hard to keep up for those people to try and save the 10% or 20% deposit that they require. Of course, shortage of new supply, as we sort of talked about in the last few months. Now, also when there's a boom happening, we also see that there's an increased preference for renting as well. So they're the sort of four major reasons why we see this, James.
Okay. Stamp duty, we often refer to it. It's like, the door fee you've got to pay to get into your favourite nightclub in your younger days. You've got to pay it before you can even get in. You really got to decide, have I got the right kit on? Am I ready for that night before I hand over the $20, $30, $40 or whatever it is these days to get in? And I guess, we have spoken about it before. I think Greg mentioned it. A few people have asked us about, the potential change that New South Wales is considering, moving from having a lump sum stamp duty paid up front to a much smaller but a lifetime tax. That may have some change. And I think definitely one of the drivers behind the New South Wales government doing that is not necessarily just to bow to the industry pressure that's out there, but really looking at that sort of older generation, the baby boomers, as we like to say it, that have got these homes where, what are we saying, Lucas? Typically the big 3, 4, even 5-bedroom homes, when maybe there's only, two people living there, husband and wife, kids have long gone. And, they're kind of looking at it, I guess, saying, well, they probably bought it a long time ago. So they're probably, debt-free. We often say they're asset-rich, cash poor, don't we?
That's right.
They're kind of saying, well, I'm happy in this home. Probably it's too big for me, but if I do move, I've got to pay selling agents commission, stamp duty, go through all that. And they're just not changing over, which I think is causing a bit of a roadblock, perhaps for potential new entrants. So, Lucas, for anyone out there aspiring to buy their next door neighbour's house or, the house down the road, should they be waiting? Is there anything likely to change in the immediate future? Or is this just part of the structural way that our housing market works?
Look, to be honest, like you said, one of the biggest issues that seniors are being faced with, that if they sell their home and they turn it into a financial asset, this will reduce the pension. It will also increase the contribution they have to make to the aged care. So, and to them, homes, it's not just an asset. They're filled with memories. It's a base for family to gather and catch up. They're surrounded by their friends that they've lived next door for many, many years. Now, the government is trying hard to sort of try and bridge the gap. They're offering stamp duty relief. And as most recently, as we saw in the budget that was released recently, that over 60s now can move more than $600,000 above what they're allowed to into the superannuation. So hopefully they will close the gap. But we're talking close to 75% of over 60s are not happy to move. So I wouldn't be waiting, James. I would try and find an alternative solution.
All right. I just saw a question I was trying not to laugh at from Annalise coming through. Said she's only in her mid-20s. She's sick of hearing about the old people. What are the government doing for younger people? Has anyone got a quick wrap they can run around as to in terms of what are the incentives out there for all home buyers, but I guess with a skew towards perhaps some of the younger buyers for Annalisa's benefit particularly?
There's a few things. The federal government, they're not massive schemes, but they're still schemes. So we've got the federal government scheme where they've got, or if you're first talking about Annalise, which is a younger thing, there's two there. There's the new home guarantee scheme. So what that does, a person would only have to have saved a 5% deposit, and the bank or the government essentially stands as guarantor. It's almost like mortgage insurance. So it allows them to get into a house, but there are caps. So, for instance, in Victoria, it's capped at 850,000 in the major cities and 500 in regional areas. Then, of course, that's on a new home. Then they've got another one called the First Home Loan Deposit Scheme, which is similar, except as if you're buying an existing home. So again, the government will stand. It's like in mortgage insurance. You just need a 5% deposit. And that's targeted for the younger person.
Yep.
There's one other one that's just been announced, which is called the Family Home Guarantee, but very limited places. There's only 2,500 across the whole of Australia. And that if you're a single parent, you only need a 2% deposit, and the government stands there, but it's a very small scheme. And again, it's capped. So those are some of the things. And then, of course, you've got the first, if you're going state government in Victoria, we've got the First Homeowner Grant. That's been extended. Again, you get a grant of $10,000, and your home cannot exceed 750. Again, there's conditions. And then the first home buyer duty exemption. So if they've extended that to, if you're buying off the plan property, you can now buy something up to $1 million dutiable value, and you get a 50% reduction, or there's concessions there as well. So they're trying to stimulate people getting into to assist where possible.
All right. So I saw quite a few comments, perhaps rather than questions coming up. So I might try and phrase a question myself. I think the general feedback as you were going through that, Greg, was all of these caps that you were mentioning don't seem to correlate that well with, house prices in the main markets of Melbourne and Sydney. So has anyone got a view, as to how can people benefit from this? What are the alternatives, or what are we seeing out there that perhaps people can still benefit from some of these schemes?
Well, as I've been pushing all the time, James, every time we talk about it is instead of trying to go out to some remote area, look at an apartment or a unit in a good area where the pricing is still within those sort of caps. So it allows a first homeowner, a single parent, these type of people to get into something, get a foothold, use those incentives to get a foothold in a good area, and apartments or units are a good option.
Yeah. Okay. Has anyone got any stats as to, where units have perhaps gone versus, we talked about the national growth. Where are units tracking and or what we expect to see them track over time?
James, the unit seems to be, we're talking about the gap between the units and the house. Now it becomes the narrow and the narrow. It's not just because the house booming in the past financial year. So the affordability in some popular area for the person who wants to buy in that location is quite harder. And it's also now we put in details for the first homeowner, like the people they want to get into the market, how much time they need to save up the deposit for the house and the unit, which also makes sense for the people when they choose to buy a house and the unit, which one they're gonna go in with. The factor is now more and more people, they're happy to go with the unit in the very good area, like the popular location. This is because there is the statistics shows for example, in Sydney, if you want to save the deposit for the entry level of the freestanding house, you need to takes you 7 years and 1 month. This is a year's more than the 1 year before if you're trying to save in that kind of the deposit. But on the other hand, if you're trying to save the deposit for the unit in the city, now it's even faster, which is 4 months faster for you can save up the deposit to purchase the apartment. It only takes you 5 years and 5 months. So this is also driving the people as a good opportunity to enter into the first property market to get into the unit.
Okay, that was really good. So for those of you that didn't quite understand what Jack was saying, often we talk about, figures, percentages, prices, and they're not necessarily grounded in what it means for you. So what Jack was actually saying there in the most recent sort of study is that for the typical freestanding home, the time that you as a first home buyer may need to save on an average wage up to get that 20% deposit has grown by more than 12 months. So, a year ago, it might have taken you, 7 years?
Six years.
Now it's going to take you 7 years. But one of the great things that perhaps isn't being spoken about enough is that when it comes to apartments, they're obviously lagging behind in terms of the growth. So right now, had you have bought an apartment 12 months ago versus buying it today, it's still going to take you about that same time. So that's really one of those opportunities that not only is the price point going to be more affordable, and perhaps there's potentially going to be stronger growth in the next 12, 18 months than freestanding homes because they've got to catch up to that price gap that's widened. Remember what I showed you right at the start where we're looking at realestate.com's buyer demand, and you saw that gap between the interest for apartments versus freestanding homes was widening. So definitely there's a good opportunity there to jump on. And I think that's really where, a lot of these incentives are primarily targeted around that slightly lower price point that you can still get a fantastic home, but you've got to look at something that's attached in sort of low, medium or high density areas. And apartments are a fantastic option if you do want to take on board any of those. All right, I've had a few people point out that we've hit the top of the hour. So I did want to just touch on one topic before we move through, and I'll try and race through it. So, Greg, we mentioned last week, you and I were chatting about, we perhaps haven't said enough about giving people sort of some tips and advice. And I know Lucas loves to give the tips around how to present your home best for selling it. We focus perhaps primarily on the last couple of months on buyers. Can you quickly run through in 60 seconds or less some of the key things that people can do to make sure that they can get the best result when they're trying to sell their home?
I made this huge list, but we'll go through it very, very quickly. In summary, so usually it's Lucas rattles on forever. I'll be short and sweet. Here we go.
All right, done. I'll start the clock on you. Fire away.
Okay, first of all, first impressions count for everything. So you've got to make a good impression straight away. As such, always present your property in the best possible way. What you do is have click-worthy photos in our social media type thing. Everybody's looking for a great photo, make it look good, put a bit of color in it, make it stand out against everything else. And then in terms of in the house itself, add color to the rooms. Take off, get rid of clutter, get rid of family photos on the fridge. People don't care. You want to make it look good.
So does that mean, Greg, at your house, you wouldn't have the picture of the Day of Storms band playing?
History, it's gone. History. So the fridge is clean. There's color. There's color around. It's decluttered. They say never take pictures of an empty house. It's pointless. Stage it. Spend a bit of money on staging, presenting like we do on our properties as well. Remove clutter. So you have stuff like that. Because people want work from home. If you've got an area like under the steps that you're storing bloody shoes and stuff like that, put a little desk in there. Make it look like another usable space. Essentially, what I always tell people is, and then try and make it look ready to move in. People don't want fixer-uppers anymore. They all these programs. So what I say is do some cosmetic changes. Make the place look cared for. Make it look loved. Don't spend a lot of money. Coat of paint. Change a few light fittings if necessary. Door handles. Fix the gutters outside. Make it look as though it's been. Make it present well. So going back to my first thing, presentation is everything. Present it well. Declutter it. Make it look good.
Yeah. All right. Sound advice there from Greg. I think, we always say that you can't sell the best kept secret. So if you don't get it properly staged, you don't get those photos there, you might not even get the traffic in to your open homes if you haven't been able to, grab their attention in amongst all the other listings, as well as obviously, try to put yourself into the mind of the buyer. As Greg said, you might love the idea of a rundown place because you can spend the next, 12 months. A friend of all of ours, the Big Mac, all he wants to do is keep building. So, he buys a new home, he makes the family move in. It's basically ready to be bulldozed. He spends 12 months, every waking minute he has, fixing it up, redoing it. Just as they get to enjoy it, he says, that's it, we're selling that place, and he buys another one. Now, there are a few odd people like him. I think he's one of a kind. But for the vast majority of us, we want something that we can just buy, grab the keys, that's in, we move in, and there's nothing to do. So, I think that's sound advice there from Greg, and a good wrap. And I think you did keep to the 60 seconds, Greg, so well done. I could see Lucas was getting very, very frustrated there, thinking someone else was stealing the tips job. But I'm sure he'll come back stronger next week for having had a break. All right, before I let everyone go, I just want to remind you that today has been fantastic, but there's a lot more to do. I'm sure that everyone got value out of today. There was a ton of great questions. We shared a heap of great information. People often say, that's great. They go back to their daily lives and they wonder, what was the point? Or, nothing changes. So what I implore all of you to do is, I really want you to focus in the next 3 minutes. I'm only going to go for a couple of minutes. And I want you to think about it. What are you doing to take that next step? Now, what I mean by that is that, as I see it, there's 3 ways you can go from here. The first one, which is what 99% of you are going to do, is you're going to do nothing. You're not going to change anything. You're going to say, today was great. You might turn up again next week or next month or whenever it is. But let me just tell you, if you don't make a change, don't take on board what we've discussed, think about that concept of actionable knowledge, then don't expect a different result. Now, for some of you, that can be that might be, you're happy where you are, and that's fantastic. But for the vast majority of you, you're probably looking to get to that next step. You're looking to make a change. You're looking to move forward. And if that is you, well, you're going to need to do one of these 2 things. At a bare minimum, I want you to take on board what we discussed today, and I want you to go out there and I want you to put that plan into place and do it yourself. We've given you the framework. We've gone through it. We're here every week. So if anything's missing or you need to clarify anything, come back, join us again, ask the questions again, get that information and go out there and do it. And when you've done it, I'd love to hear about it. We love hearing about what people have done, where they've gone and the journey they've done. So, that is what I implore all of you to do at a bare minimum. But what I really, really hope that you do is go on that journey with us. Let us help you. What do successful people do? They don't try and do it all themselves. They look for the professionals, the people that they can partner with, the people that can fast track them on that journey. So, don't think about it as, I can do it all myself. I don't need help. What are they going to be in my business? Think about who, how, and where can someone help you fast forward that journey so you can get to your end goal and your destination quicker. And I believe we can do that for you. That's what we love doing. We've got a long, long track record of helping so many thousands and thousands of people just like you out there achieve that home ownership goal that they've been looking for. And we'd love to do it with you. So how can we help you? Well, as I said to you, we've got a ton of different businesses. There is heaps and heaps of things that we can do. But I think ultimately right now, the smallest investment that you could possibly make and still expect to get some real results is to have a one-on-one catch-up. Now, what do I mean by this? It's simple. It can be on the phone. It can be face-to-face. It can be on Zoom. It can be on WhatsApp, WeChat, whatever you want, however it is. we're talking about a 15 to 20 minute catch up. I've set aside plenty of time in everyone's diaries over the next 5 days for you to jump on and grab one of these spots. And literally, what do? We have a quick chat, talk about where you've been going, what you're interested in doing. If you have been trying for a while, tell us some of the hurdles you've run into, some of the reasons why you've struggled. We might chat a little bit more about the market and where we see certain things are. And really what we're just trying to do is work out if, you are a good fit for us. Now, not everyone is going to be a good fit, but really what we're hoping to do is work out if we can work together and can we actually help you. And I would say that if you've been on today's session, you got value out of it, then it's perfect. Now, for those of you that are wondering, I don't know, is this what's involved in this? It's straightforward. There is no commitment other than we're asking for 15 to 20 minutes of your time to see if we can move forward together and we can help you fast forward that journey. Now, if you're still wondering, is this right for me? I'll tell you, it's really, really simple. You've got to be prepared to do the hard work. You've got to be prepared to roll up your sleeves. You understand the concept of actionable knowledge. You want to grow that database so you know what to do. And ultimately, you're hungry and you're ready to move forward and make those changes. Anyone who's been doing this for a long time and doesn't actually want to make those changes, then perhaps you're not going to be the right fit for us. And that's okay. We're not going to be able to help everyone, but we'd love to see if we can help you. So, don't delay, jump on, grab one of those spots. So how do you do it? Really, really simple. I can already see most of you have figured it out. There's a link in the chat. Jump on, go and book your preferred time. It's as simple as that. If you don't know how to use that booking form, just send us an email, put a comment in there, a Q&A. We'll hang around after and help you how to book it. Those of you that can't see the chat, most of you that joined us via Zoom should have been redirected in your web browser to that booking page. Jump on there. Lastly, for those of you that don't have your diaries with you or you've got to run off now and you don't have time or you want to think about it, I'll send you a follow-up email after this session ends and the link will be in there so you can jump on anytime. But the longer you delay, the less chance you'll have of having your preferred time. As I said, I've put dedicated time in everyone's diaries just for these sessions. So that is it. I said I just wanted a few minutes to wrap up. I think this is really, really important that I map out for you. Whilst today was great, what is the next logical step for you and your journey? And how can we work together with you to help you get that goal? So hopefully most of you would have got value out of today. You'll see the value in taking that next step and investing just that small amount of 15 to 20 minutes in yourself and getting this done and moving forward. So from me and everyone here, thank you very much for sticking with us. I know there's a ton of things that you could have been doing today. So I really, really appreciate you all putting aside the time and joining us. We love doing this. The reason we do it is to see that energy, get all those questions from you, see how much you guys love it. And the feedback is always fantastic from everyone. So hopefully we see you again next week or next month or next quarter, whenever it is. So once again, thank you very much from me and the rest of the panel and look forward to seeing you guys again.